I'm going to peel back the curtain just for a second because I kept thinking about what we talked about a week ago when I asked Mr. Maurice Scott if he would join us for the discussion. You know, the only question he asked me is like, why are you guys doing this? You know? And I believe what I said is because the world is on fire and we need to do our part as a community. We need to do our part as individuals to address something that's bipartisan or non-partisan, whichever way you want to look at it. There's really an issue of public safety. And in the conversation with Maurice Scott, I found out that gun violence is the leading cause of death for teenagers between 1 and 17. You know, I found out so many things I didn't know. And so just in the short conversation that we've had, you know, I was encouraged to just keep moving forward with this event. So this is really also a testament to the power of the arts. You know, this is what the arts can do. The arts can elevate our discussion. The arts has a way of reaching you where words don't touch you, you know? And there's no better example in my mind than the instrument of hope. So I want to turn it over to Mr. Kim Scharnberg because this also says something about our organization, that we're putting an arranger and a composer in the hot seat, you know, guiding this discussion. He's used to orchestrating things, but we've met many years ago for a very similar project. But please welcome Mr. Kim Scharnberg.
Thank you very much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. We're actually going to start off by playing a video of some of the people who I've known. And there's two students from Parkland when I worked with them, and also the music teacher from Sandy Hook Elementary who was there when the tragedy occurred, and she put 13 children in a locker in her closet to keep them safe. And it's a dear friend of mine. And she also agreed to do a video. So if you just turn your attention over here, start out with that.
Hi St. Pete, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Andrea Pena and I graduated from Marjory Stoneman Douglas in the year 2020 and I currently attend the University of Florida. Music has always been a huge component of my life. Whether it be by taking piano lessons since I was 5, singing lessons when I was 9, and all the way to high school by doing musical theater, it has been my place of refuge and solitude in the times where I needed it most. We would like to thank the Warehouse Arts District Association for having this event and continuing this important conversation. I've seen what arts and music can truly do in times of darkness, and together I hope we can come up with more ways to utilize these tools and bring more light.
Hi St. Pete's, my name is Ashley Passeltiner and I graduated from Marjory Stoneman Douglas in 2019 and I'm about to graduate from Muhlenberg College with a double major in theater and psychology. So after the shooting, music was the main thing that helped me cope, whether it was listening to a playlist that I made in my car or singing with my friends and their guitar. Music was always there to support me. I still rely on music to this day just to help me express my feelings, and it's really been the best support system for me throughout the years.
Hello, St. Pete's and the Warehouse Arts District Association. Thank you so much for sponsoring this event and for your important mission. It's dear to my heart and will truly make a difference for so many in your community. Participation in the arts immediately reduces stress and anxiety and helps create a safe place for healing and expressing what can't be put into words. A great example for this is what happened in my school one day at dismissal time after the tragedy. The first grade teacher, who had all of the students in her class that survived from our 2 affected classes, came out into the hallway and said, "Can somebody please come and help me? Can somebody please come in here?" I was in the hallway and walked into the room, and every child was sobbing. Also in the room were several mental health professionals trying to console them. Horrible. Immediately I said, okay, we are going to sing. And I started with some funny songs, and every child started to sing. They stopped crying, and they started to sing. Then I said, okay, stand up, let's do some more. And we did some songs with motions that they could clap their hands and move to. Nobody cried until the last bus left. After that, the children asked if I could come and sing with them. And I went to see them during dismissal every day so that they could look forward to it. And also, many times the teacher came to find me when they were having a tough time and they just needed to sing. The children inherently knew what made them feel better. Their participation in music made them feel normal and happier. Music, singing, and movement helped put the terror in the back of their minds. I feel this really demonstrates how the arts can help people express emotions when they don't know how to talk about it. These first graders did not know how to put things into words, but they knew what they needed. And I came to know how I could help them. And it helped me too. One of the first times our school came together and sang was to film one voice and our school song for From Broadway with Love.
6 weeks after the tragedy at Sandy Hook, Broadway came together to show our support for the Newtown community. I'm Brian Stokes Mitchell. Please join me, Michael Cerveris, Linda Etter, and an all-star cast of Tony Award winners, Sesame Street friends, and more than 300 performers from Newtown schools for a once-in-a-lifetime musical celebration of life and love on From Broadway with Love.
This was an incredibly amazing concert put on for us by the generous and kind Broadway community. They also did this for Florida, for Orlando and Parkland. When they came to our school, the 3rd and the 4th graders and the staff came together in the gym to sing their hearts out. The rehearsal process and the professionals who came gave meaning to our work. Students and staff alike were so proud of what they accomplished, and everyone left the gym with huge smiles. Before this time, it was too difficult to sing the school song at the morning announcements. From this point forward, we were able to sing it with gusto.
3 cheers for the green and the white, and Sandy Hook School forever. Thank you and work hard, get smart and be kind. Sandy Hook Elementary, a very special place to be. We'll have lots of fun and we'll know we'll do our best, our very best to learn and grow.
Broadway professionals, along with a Newtown parent, started a summer theater group called New Arts in Newtown. I volunteered and helped teach the music with them for the 9 years we were in existence. Our incredible summers made a difference for hundreds of traumatized students and myself as well. Many from the community volunteered and they attended in droves. The connections I made with adults and students helped me move forward in my own healing process. I hope this can give you a starting point for discussions about activities that would be helpful in your community. Whatever you choose, the arts bring people in the community together in a meaningful way where they get to know and respect each other. Thank you so much for letting me share with you.
You're not gonna knock us down, we'll get back up again. You may have hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger. And we're not gonna let you in, we're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark, together we will shine the light.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Warehouse Arts Arts Districts for hosting this and for all of you being here for this important community conversation. I'm Representative Lindsay Cross, and I represent District 60 in the State House of Representatives. We are just south of District 60, so it includes portions of St. Petersburg and Pinellas Park. During my campaign for the State House, I worked closely with groups like Moms Demand Action and Giffords, organizations that help support gun safety candidates, and was honored to receive those endorsements during my campaign. This is something that I know has touched too many people's lives in our state and across our nation, and so I've been committed to enacting common sense gun reform. We are in a super minority in the Florida State House right now. We have 85 Republicans and 35 Democrats. So we have a small and mighty group there. We are the voice of the approximately 77% of Floridians who want stronger gun protection in our state.
My name is Tara Newsom. I'm a faculty member at St. Pete College. Who's a graduate here of St. Pete College? Come on. Right down the street in Midtown. I'm also the director of our Center for Civic Learning and Community Engagement, and that's where we do most of our work in gun prevention and peace building. And I'm really happy to be here today because what we try to do in our classrooms on our campuses is teach each person in their own brand of citizenship how to build peace. And I'm hoping that this conversation will help each of us look inside of ourselves to contribute to this.
Hi, my name is Maurice Scott. Myself and my wife, Marjory Scott, we're parents of Marquise Rory Scott. He was a Northeast High School football all-star and also liked the gun violence, September 17, 2019. Our faith in God implored us to use forgiveness and love to change our heartache and pain into something we can do to help the community. We started with a pledge against gun violence. We went out into communities where guys are most likely to use gun violence, and we had conversations with them. The pledge, in essence, asked them to walk away from situations that may lead to violence, with our goal being just to plant the seed of personal accountability for the safety of our communities into the hearts and minds of each and every one of those guys. We then went to community events, talked about our organization, talked about our sons, the things that happened to our son, in hopes that that conversation may be had with the neighbors, the aunts, the uncles, and aunties. And eventually we realized in order to change the culture that we had to go after the young people who were going to grow up in the system. So we created a program, training of sorts, called 5 Keys to End Gun Violence among young people. And we partnered with the city of St. Petersburg, Parks and Rec, and we trained all their kids in the task force program. And also into sports, high schools, sports organizations, charter schools. And as of last year, or this actually September 15th of this last month, we had over just under 700 kids adopt nonviolent lifestyles from our trainings, and we trained over 320 adults. So we've been very impactful. We're healing. We're grateful for the opportunity to be here, and we hope to continue to bring awareness to the need to end gun violence. Thank you very much.
Councilmember John Muhammad, everybody call me Brother John, for District 7 City Council in St. Petersburg. And my interaction and really journey with gun violence started in 1995 when I was one decision away from a life sentence. A friend of mine committed an act that if I had not argued with my girlfriend at the time, she's my wife now, I was married. I don't know if she has that same sentiment. But we argued, and the discussion that we were having was around me not going to work. I was involved in some things that, I had a job, but I wasn't attending regularly. And on this particular day, she was fed up with that and said, she needed a little more security. You need to go to work. And so I decided that day I was going to listen to her, and I went to work. She called me 3 o'clock that afternoon, or 10 o'clock that morning, saying, I don't know what's going on, but your brother looks like, he's about to get into something. 3 o'clock, she called me back and said that he had just murdered somebody and attempted to murder someone else around the corner. It was a case of self-defense. This was at the height of the war on drugs, and black people didn't really have the benefit of those types of defenses, and we ended up getting 58 years in prison. Were it not for that opportunity, or for me having the job and actually going to work, I know that I would have been in the car with him. And so that sent me on a path subsequent to that of ensuring that we create opportunities for young people who may be what they call at risk, to have places to go, safe places to be, so that they can avoid those types of decisions. And so we created several programs. We launched an initiative, Stop the Violence campaign in 2013, 2012. That was actually nationally recognized by President Obama as a part of our volunteer service work, and really bringing awareness to gun violence. We also began looking at some of the root causes for gun violence and started doing things with the arts. So we came up with a program called the New Image Project. Image is an acronym for information, media, arts, graphics, and entertainment, called creating programs, after-school programs. We did a pool party, a Friday night pool party in the summer called Friday Night Done Right, with the goal of creating a safe space for young people to just show up and be themselves without having to worry about, gun violence in the environment for a few hours. And so continuing that work on council, advocating for resources, for programs that actually create safe spaces and educational opportunities for youth. This is what we're doing now.
So I am a professor at Austin Peay State University with their new Institute for National Security and Military Studies, and I teach within National Security Studies there. But before I became a college professor, I was actually a K through 12 teacher, or high school teacher specifically, at Central High School of Knoxville, Tennessee. So for some of you all who might be country music fans, to kind of root that for you, it was the school that Roy Aycock attended, but it's also the high school that Kelsey Ballerini attended. And she was actually one of my students, but you might have seen her speak on gun violence too, because I believe it was in 2009, we had a live shooting at our school. And one of my students was actually the perpetrator in that shooting, where another was shot and killed during breakfast hours. So I remember very vividly what it was like to be on lockdown for 5+ hours with around 40+ children in the classroom, all of us hiding and having no news, no information of what to do next. And prior to that, I had also gone through a live shooting at Opry Mills Mall in Nashville. So between both of those and those experiences, and I think we had about 7 children within our small jewelry store at Opry Mills Mall, where we were hiding behind the counters with the gates down. Thank goodness for my teacher training, because I was like, we've got 15 seconds to get the gates down, the lights turned off, everything locked, and get behind the counters. But with all of those experiences together, whenever I started teaching college, I had a student that wanted to come in and do a master's thesis on mass shootings and how to prevent them. What factors can we look at to better keep these incidents from occurring? And so we created a new U.S. active shooter incidents database, and I started inviting people to be part of this research team, and was very lucky to have the person next to me here, Dr. Kirsten England. So that's part of the reason why I'm here tonight.
And I'm Kirsten England. I'm assistant professor at WUSF. But before that, like Erin, I was K-12. I actually did the inner city St. Pete. So I had a lot of my students come from different types of backgrounds. I was, as a classroom teacher in those type of schools, having correspondence with some of the parents that were in jail that were convicted of murder, of these different episodes of gun violence. And so having to look at the students and to walk them through that and to let them know they can persevere, even though this has been surrounding them for so long and part of their life. And so when Erin had asked me to be part of the project, I of course jumped on it. And And so we have been working on a database and different prevention protocols, what works, what doesn't, all of that kind of stuff looking forward.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to jump into questions for the panel, and I'm going to start with you, Tara. What role can each of us in our professional lives and place in the community contribute to preventing gun violence?
I think the unique composition of our panel and seeing some of my students out here and people that have served in the community shows the rich diversity of what we can contribute, right? And so I teach on a college campus. It's supposed to be a sanctuary of open thought to explore the historical understanding of the Constitution and the Second Amendment, but also each of our individual roles in breaking the cycles that contribute to gun violence and to create deeper understanding of mental health resources and economic interventions that can happen, social interventions. And so when I was looking at the panel and thinking about how each one of us can contribute to this, I was thinking, of course, of our representative who can be a decision maker and a leader and try to gain, legislative support and trying to create gun regulation, and then parents who can help us bridge to a place that we can't possibly see, which is an understanding of the tragedy of the loss of a child. But a composer and artist who can bring, the power of art to understanding, academicians, city council members, and those that have, contributed to a community. That kind of pluralism is what I think I'm looking for, and I'm looking for that in our community. What can each one of us, in the quietness of our own lives and the skills that we bring, contribute to this, even if it just means being able to listen and have an open heart to get to a place where we can build policies that can break this cycle. And so that's what I'm really here, is to listen to not only the colleagues that I have on the panel, but to our community members to see how we can each contribute to solving this.
Great. Thank you, Tara. Anybody else who would like to jump in on what they feel is their own individual mission to contribute?
I can speak to that a little bit. So with our active shooter incidents database, part of what we've seen with some of the research on gun violence is it takes a broad swath look at gun violence in general and tries to say, okay, how do we get at preventing more of these incidents? But what we've tried to do a little bit differently is pull out specifically the mass shooting incidents that target the public. And I think that whenever we look at this from maybe more so in our instances of research perspective, by splitting those out, you can get a better look at what preventative measures work for particular types. So what you maybe see with like gang violence is not necessarily the same thing that you see with criminal activity, which for mass shooter incidents, sometimes that can even differ with the places that people target and why. But altogether though, you do see, as you so well share, that there is an underlying mental health crisis going on in our country that's connected to all of this, and I think that's one way we can definitely speak to this issue.
Great, thank you, Erin. And this also is a good bridge to a question I was going to ask Brother John. We had a Zoom call a week ago just to talk about some topics of discussion, and one of the things that Brother John brought up is that we tend to think, I know I tend to think of gun violence in terms of mass shooting. We look at Lewiston from just last week. It was actually a Zoom call, and certainly here in Tampa Bay last weekend when two people were murdered and 18 were injured. But could you discuss a little bit about the impact on individual shootings and their effect on children and others beyond just family members?
Absolutely. Thank you. Perfect. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, good.
Great job to our hosts. And can I pause for a moment? I'd like to recognize that our mayor is here. I want to thank him for being here with us. The impact, again, it started with me personally when that incident happened with my brother. So this was things that were going on, around us, but a lot of times until it's you and your family, you don't really think about the direct impact of how it affects you. And it sent me into a state of depression, even though I wasn't there with him. But I thought about all of the things I could have said, to try and prevent it and how I could have intervened. And so you have one of the impacts I think that is overlooked is survivor's remorse, I think is the term to use, where those who are connected to people who are in incidents, you beat yourself up about how you could have done more and you should have, could have, would have, and that can lead to depression and mental health issues. The other part I think of the impact is the impact that it has on bystanders. And so if you're not, shot or injured, but you witness, these types of things, the trauma of just being a witness to something like that impacts your mental health. And when we deal with small children who are in these types of environments and situations, a lot of it we're seeing now is, arguments that escalate to, someone being shot and killed. And we're having conversations now about therapy and treatment and being able to talk through what that experience has been. But for a long time, if you witness your father, shoot your mother, 3 days later you're going back to school as nothing happened. I was in a park where there was a shooting. Again, I was not directly involved, but somebody walked up and shot somebody in a space that I was in. And there's no conversation about the impact of the bystander witnesses that. And so it's so many ways that these things show up in our community and our mental health that I think it's an opportunity for us to begin to address. Those are just some of my initial thoughts that I had about the impact on children, the impact on bystanders, and those who are survivors that are connected to people. I have a cousin who murdered someone, and the two families, as a part of our Stop the Violence initiative in 2012, one of the things that got it recognized was I was able to bring my aunt and the mother of the person who was murdered together for healing, because the parents on these different sides of it and the families are at odds, even though they had nothing directly to do with it. And so my aunt and the depression that she had, with her knowing that her son was involved in that, and then being able to talk to the mother of someone whose child her child took, was very powerful and impactful. But it was some really hard work, and I don't think a lot of people are willing to do and talk about the reconciliation of communities and families as you navigate these individual personal life shootings.
Thank you, Brother John. Maurice, it seems like this would be a good thing for you to comment on as well.
Sure. I think we have to understand as a society, we're moving so much in the direction of self-centeredness. People are so focused on themselves that it's easy for them to be selfish when it comes to protecting their own families and not being concerned about their neighbors. And if you bring in the fear-mongering that's going on, you got everybody that's becoming gun owners. And not realizing that the moment you purchase a gun, you're saying to yourself and possibly others that you're willing to take a life. You're willing to take a life. So the main thing that we can do in a situation where all this hate and fear is coming up is that we can fight it with that age-old, trusty, cure-all, and that's love. Simply caring for your neighbors. We say there are 3 ways that we can fight this thing. One, we talked about legislation, fighting gun violence, and we talked about healing people who deal with trauma through mental health. But also, we can create a safe space. In our own neighborhoods, we can talk to our neighbors down the street. You could be the lady who makes cookies, or the guy who throws hot dogs on the grill and feeds all the kids in the neighborhoods. The truth is that we're not loving each other enough, we're not communicating with each other enough, and of course what the pandemic did, it's totally separated us even more. And so everybody with all that fear, it's easy to move from self-centeredness to I have to hurt someone to feel safe. And unfortunately, so many people are traumatized by that. Not just the family who gets hurt, but also the family of the shooter. When that kid or that adult goes to jail, that family goes to prison with them as well. The coaches, the teachers who spend so much time with these youth and these young people, they're affected as well. We got groups of people who go to clubs. It used to be a safe space for them to kind of hang out. It's not safe for them anymore. And we have kids who've lost their friends in their schools. And we send in a therapist and we tell them to go back there and it's going to be safe. How terrible that is. So again, the one thing that we can all do is we can love each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Cross, could you talk a little bit, again, on the Zoom call, we talked a little bit about some of the efforts that you've seen of policing efforts in the community, and also some of the programs that are out there to help victims of gun violence. If you could speak to some of that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I think both Brother John and Maurice are sharing so many really powerful examples of what's happening here. And with our mayor here in attendance, there's been a concerted effort to integrate our police into our communities more, and to make our police officers part of our community as people who are here to help, to create dialogue within the neighborhoods. Programs like Not My Son, which engage people in the neighborhood, again, taking pledges of anti-violence. And so I think when we look at how we talk about things and we create neighbors and we create communities, it's important that our police presence is integrated in a thoughtful way in our communities, and I want to applaud the City of St. Petersburg for doing that. We're seeing improvements in community safety as a result of that, and that's because of leadership, both at at the mayoral level, leaders on our city council, and something I think that in this community we can be really proud of.
Great, thank you so much. Aaron and Kirsten, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about some of the research you've been doing. And Kirsten, I have to say, she's the most prepared person here on the panel with her papers, and I love this woman that she came in and she grilled me earlier in the week, and I'm like, okay, well, we're going to jump into it, so I appreciate it. And it would be great, since the two of you work so closely together, just to talk a little bit about some of the work that you do.
Nothing else but that.
Well, one of the things that we have done with our active shooter incidents research is we've tried to do something a little bit different than anyone else before, and split out the different venue types to see like what we see with school shootings, what we see with and within each of those venue types, like subcategorize them. So with school shootings, we look at how elementary school compares to middle school, high school, college, and then even like attacks on administrative offices. We do the same with retail, commercial spaces, with houses of worship, and government facilities, healthcare facilities, so on and so forth. But we found some really interesting things that have come out of this. And again, for me, it's how do we prevent this from occurring again, but also too, because I've got family in healthcare administration who have had to let people go from jobs, and heard some very unusual threats or things being made against like places of work, looking for if there's particular spots that are very vulnerable. And for example, like one of the findings that we've recently presented was whenever you look at school shootings, you see a lot of, well, with middle schools and high schools, it's very predominantly the students themselves. They're being motivated because they feel that they're bullied or they're angry at someone, or sometimes even that someone can be parents. But with elementary schools, what we have seen, and this has been disturbing to us, is that's where outsiders attack. It's not the students, and in only one case was it a faculty or staff member. The outsiders target the elementary schools, and then it's kind of a mixed bucket for universities. So that's part of what we're trying to pull out. We see some interesting things with house of worships. For example, with those, while they're rare, yes, we know that there's a large number of attacks on Jewish synagogues in the country. But whenever you also pull out like the Christian houses of worship, and people say, well, you know, there's a lot of them, we don't necessarily see anything unusual because there's so many Christian houses of worship in this country. Actually, whenever you look at the different denominations, it's very predominantly evangelical denominations. And so we, you know, ask what's going on there, what are we seeing, and there's a potential like political polarization that's happening. So I think this comes back to what you're saying about love there, and you know, and what's happening there, and particularly in that space regarding so much self-interest sometimes and why people are attacking. But I'll pass it along, and if there's something else you might want to add on that. Okay. I will say too, like, and we found some different things. This is an area where we have different points on, but I know a lot of states are looking at red flag laws. And, right. And so I know this has been a thing here in Florida very recently too. In Tennessee right now, after the Covenant school shooting that happened in Nashville, which my research assistant nannied for some of those families there at Covenant School, so she was really close to that situation. But whenever we look at red flag laws and are they effective, are they not, some of the findings and things are mixed, but whenever you get down to particular cases, what we do know is there's been a problem. And I will say this as a former teacher that went through this. There has been a problem of families not being able to say, I've got a concern with my child, and I think they might be wanting to commit suicide or wanting to hurt someone else or wanting to hurt the public. There have been instances where, and this happened at my school, where teachers or principals thought they heard something. But because of certain rights in the country, you're limited from being able to take away weapons from individuals in certain states without more of an act being committed first. And so that has been, for me personally, one of the positives of red flag laws, and they're applied differently in different states of who can report these. But that has been one of the positives is it gives you an avenue for at least temporarily taking away those weapons from individuals who might be making threats against themselves or others.
Could either of you explain the difference between red flag laws and yellow flag laws? Because I know the yellow flag laws is what applied to the Lewiston, Maine shooting, and that was this particular incident that wasn't quite as strict for a red flag. Can you address that?
So I can operationally define red flag laws for you.
And yellow flag as well?
That's not been...
it's not a thing? Okay.
Well, there is the other term, the extreme violence protection order.
Yeah, but they're synonymous, and that's the thing. So you're saying yellow flag laws, that's what we're looking, and I think it's just who can report it is more or less looking, the difference being. So if we look and we're in operationally defined red flag law. So what a red flag law says is, in most states, what it says is that law enforcement, someone will report something. So you'll go to the police department, you'll call them, you'll report someone may harm themselves or others. And what they have actually found is that 80% of people who commit crimes, regardless of the crime, and especially gun crimes, they signal beforehand, whether that be on social media or to their friends or in a notebook or just something, that there is something that they have said to say, this is most likely going to happen. A lot of times what we say is, they're not going to really do that. Or I know this person well enough, so they don't really need it. But if we decide that this is serious enough, we can go to the police department and report that. The police will do a very short investigation. Then they will go to a judge for an order. Judge does have to sign off on it. And they will take their ability to be able to get a weapon, or if they do have a weapon, they will take that weapon for them. And it's up to 1 year. And then it can be renewed up again, but they will have to re-review it at that point, okay? And so the concern is, of course, whether or not we're taking away people's rights, all of that kind of thing. But it is a safety measure, a preventative instead of a reactive, okay? Safety measure when it comes to that. When it comes to what I'm thinking you're referring to as yellow flag is in some states what people can do is if we have parents or parishioners or anyone who is involved closely with an individual and they say, you know what, again, I've seen the signaling, they can actually go and ask or to the court themselves and ask for that to be removed, okay? So it's who's reporting it, who's actually taking it. But what they have found with red flag laws is that though they can be extraordinarily prohibited in what they're able to do, Connecticut being the first state that ever put that into place in 1999, so it's the best longitudinal study that we have found, is that law enforcement and the public really don't understand that one, they even have them or how they work, and so they're not being implemented. And that's what we're seeing by and large. And even when they are implemented, we're not seeing the community buy-in. So they're thinking that, well, they're just coming to take away my rights. They're coming to, because I did something wrong. And they're not understanding that it's a helpful measure instead of a punitive one. And so there's a lot more education that is needed when it comes to red flag laws because of that, so that the community can understand and be a part of it. And I think that's the piece that's really missing when it comes to this for them to truly be effective.
And if I may slightly add to that, there's also too with red flag laws, like a lot of people want to know, well, what happens if somebody falsely reports against me? They can very much experience punitive measures, even to the point of like felony in cases if they falsely report or trying to do that to someone. But with the survivor's remorse that you talked about, like there were so many of us teachers or even fellow students in the case that happened at our school that said, I think I heard this, or I think I heard that. What should I have done more? What could I have done? And now, going back, looking back, the answer was that there wasn't much more that we could have done that we hadn't already. So now today, though, hopefully we have more of that measure in Florida.
One question I have that's not clear to me is are the red flag laws governed by each state and interpreted by each state? So Florida is different than Connecticut?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And
some states will adopt other states' policies or modify it. So like Tennessee right now is looking at Florida and other places to see which one they might consider.
Right. Okay, thank you.
The same thing, so 19 states currently have.
Right, correct. Thank you. Thank you. Maurice, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your 5 keys of gun violence prevention. If you could sort of bring it to the many communities.
Sure. I want to piggyback something I think needs to be brought up. One of the main things that we have to be concerned about as gun owners or as people in the community is responsible gun ownership. I don't know if you guys are going to cover that. We're finding in our communities that these kids are just taking guns out of cars. I think last year or so we had over 1,000 guns that were taken from cars, and a great many of them were used in gun violence. So responsible gun ownership is definitely something we ought to look at promoting more so. And not looking at it as a community as being more restrictive of us when we're being informed about what we should and should not do with our gun ownership, and not letting our, I won't go there, but not letting ourselves be manipulated by those in quote-unquote control. About our 5 keys. Our 5 keys, 5 keys to end gun violence among young people. Again, we realize that in any culture change, whether it's at the police department or the city department or government, anytime you want to change the culture, you have to go after those most resistant, and you have to train your people, but you have to bring a new group of people in with the state of mind that you want to permeate that community or that culture. And so that's how we came up with the 5 keys to end gun violence among young people. Number 1 was who's affected. I think I mentioned that. It was more than just the family we saw at the funeral. It was, I think there was a kid who was in class with my son. Didn't know my son, but he stated he came to school because my son was so funny that he made school fun for him. And that losing my son from a distance impacted him. There were guys who were working in the rec centers, and they're watching our kids come through from 5 on up. And when they see one of these kids lost, let me say it this way, we were training the kids, the adults who were watching over them were walking out because on the video they saw a kid that they had a hand in raising. So many people are affected, so it's not just the family whose loved one is taken, but then also how drugs, alcohol, and the no snitching culture adds and aids in the deaths of so many young people in our community. Kids are actually twice as likely to be victims of gun violence when they hang around places where alcohol is served and where kids are using drugs. And in fact, there were 2 kids who found themselves arrested for murder, woke up in the jail, and didn't even remember committing the crime, and they never went home. We talk about, again, why do we remain silent? I'll be honest with you, we might not know who has the guns, but the kids know. And these kids riding around with book bags at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Most of the time, many times, there are guns in those bags. We were lucky one time a kid said he was gonna shoot a kid after PE, and the kid he told took a risk and went and told one of the teachers, and the teacher talked to the principal, and they were able to grab that kid before he murdered the other kid. Now, the sad part about it was no one told this kid's parent that he just did the snitch deal, and he was stressed. By the time of the end of his day, he gets into a big fight. His mom shows up, has no idea of the tension that he was feeling there. Once she showed up, he just cried because he was terribly afraid. Because with my son was murdered because he saw someone murder someone else or shoot someone else, and these kids feared that he was going to tell. So we talk about who's impacted, how guns, drugs, and alcohol, and why do we remain silent, including the guys who was involved in murdering my son, shot a police officer, killed 2 other young ladies, and shot a man over a gold chain. So if we had gotten those kids arrested sooner, we could have saved a lot more lives. We also talked to them about taking a stance and adopting a nonviolent lifestyle. We make sure that they understand that they can be accountable for their safety, and if they can choose a friend, just like a workout partner, to get their attention when they start to slide in the wrong direction, they can work out their own sense of nonviolent standing in their life. And they can actually affect their own, not only just their own surrounding space or personal space, but others around them. And it becomes infectious. We've seen that after we train at some rec centers, that environment becomes a place where kids start to police themselves. But we have to have that conversation with them. One kid stated, I thought when my friend got in trouble, I had to go with them. And I had to make sure they understood that just because someone looked at them across from the cafeteria in the wrong way, just because someone said something on social media, no one has the right to ask you to risk your mom's hopes and your daddy's dreams, or your auntie's little man, or your uncle's favorite little niece. You're risking all of your family's hopes, dreams, and peace of mind, and no one has the right to ask you to risk that. And kids were never told that, and they were happy to know that. Lastly, we're not just talking about taking a stance against gun violence. We talk about when should we take a stance, and again, we say right now. People are dying. People are dying, and if you kill someone, you're going to jail, and the likelihood that you're going to live in poverty when you come out is high, because who wants to hire a murderer? So what we want kids to understand is that we can be accountable for the safety of our own communities. And by sharing our perspective on it, we can positively affect our community. And we totally believe at Keys for Life that we in 2.5 years of our 8-year plan of making sure this St. Petersburg area is safe. So again, thank you guys for listening to our 5 Keys.
Let me just say that
within our own country, we have the capacity to solve this problem. But a lot of it has to do with the polarization or the bastardization of what we think about our Constitution. And that problem has evolved over time. And we're very sensitive on this panel not to make this a polarized political debate about the Second Amendment. So I don't want to lean into that space, and I hope you honor that. But the fact that we have not had a real conversation about the Second Amendment within our own American family, that we backed away from the American gospel that our framers really wanted of us, which was that in this public space that we can have competing ideas, but that we have to have tolerance for each other's liberties. That means we have to honor Second Amendment and those that advocate for it, but honor those that want reasonable gun regulation. And so what I would ask you, my new friend, is that you join in finding those safe spaces like this and start talking about our own Constitution, our own social contract, and how we can build peace among each other. Because right now, what we're really living out is the same conflict that we have regarding our reproductive freedoms, the same conflict we have regarding climate change, the polarization. So I think within our own country, if we can come into an understanding what our framers intended of us, that we've had tolerance and understanding for each other's liberties, and that we can find those solutions if we're open to them. So when someone says, hey, I believe in the Second Amendment, that rather than doing this, that we lean in and say, well, tell me about what is it, generational? Is it you hunt? Do you, etc. And then they might be able, because you've modeled that, to listen to your concepts about how reasonable gun regulation can create a safer environment. The listening to one another. I know that seems so trite because people's children are dying. And a mother of four, I can't wrap my head around that. And the families that drove up from Miami, but I do know that it does start with love, and that includes empathy and listening. And so perhaps we need to add our voices to that, and that might be the first step.
I like how you frame that question when you talk about gun and violence. In our Stop the Violence campaign in 2012, that was the cry, stop the violence. And then what happens in that space is every time an act of violence happens, you feel defeated. And so what we decided to do was take the emphasis off of trying to stop the violence, because of just historical context and all of the realities associated with that, was we changed the mantra to increase the peace. And we then began to look at things that create peaceful environments. So how can we take our focus off of what we were trying to stop and prevent, but then doing something that we could control? And so that's where the ideas around individual things that you can do, like mindfulness and being able to self-regulate when you're feeling these conflicts of emotions and you want to act out violently, being able to self-regulate. Also being able to create community spaces like the Friday Night Done Right, where we said if we can't go out here and put our finger in the barrel of every gun, at least we can create an environment where people can come into, and we would protect the perimeter and promote this as a peaceful place or as a safe space. And so we could contribute to reducing violence by focusing on ways that we could increase peace. What causes frustration? If you broke, you're hungry? I think James Baldwin said, if I'm hungry, you're not safe. And so being mindful that there are conditions in our community that lead to the frustrations that cause people to snap, as we say. And the thing that we see as trivial, somebody being murdered over a parking spot, for example, there's a chain of events and a series of actions that happen, and that just happens to be the last straw for that person, and then they react violently. And so being able to get in front of it and understand the societal pressure that are on people who commit these types of acts was a way that we began to focus on to contribute to the stopping violent piece by increasing peaceful situations.
Also, to address one point of your question that you asked about other countries, because that was something I also asked too. What have other countries done differently that have it caused them to experience more or less gun violence? Because we do know the United States stands out in a way, and even whenever we look at this per capita, divided by the size of our population. I will say, though, one of the things that I personally have noticed, I won't speak for all of my research team on this, but And there is a book, The Violence Project by Peterson and Dinsley, that really spell this out well too, is that other countries do experience violence like this as well, but it can be by different means. So, you have the cars that drive into the parades, you have sometimes more bombings and all of that. What, though, does point out the United States is very unique too in all of this, besides the amount of gun ownership and to the deadliness of gun violence itself, is that also the wide wealth gap here and the high levels of poverty for our country. That's something that, and I'm saying that from a non-partisan, non-political perspective, but that's something that stands out. And then the other thing is for a advanced democracy, our lack of access to mental health care. And specifically with that, when we talk about adult attackers too, or adults in gun violence, we see a lot of people who are blue-collar workers that have lost their jobs, that don't necessarily think they've got anywhere else to turn. And so what Peterson and Dinsley call it is violent suicide by other means. And so, yeah, that's what sometimes happens. And so how do we tackle that with mental health?
Thanks. So I'm going to actually build off of what Ms. Tara had said. If we look at what we actually can see bipartisanly, there's two things that we have a tendency to agree on regardless of what color we identify with. And that is, we have agreed that we need to perhaps raise the age for which people are able to get guns from 18 to 21, and we've seen bipartisan support behind that. And the other thing we've seen bipartisan support with is for those who are severely mentally ill. And it's not us defining that. That would be a medical professional who comes in and says, this person is just not equipped to be able to operate something of that capacity in a meaningful way. And so at this point in time, we're not going to allow that to occur. And again, there is bipartisan support when it comes to that. So what do we have to look at? Well, what do we have on our commonalities? At least we have those two things. We can start there. We can go from there. We can build off of it. We can start at the state level and then go higher to the federal level. And we have these grassroots movements and people like you who are seeing these things, which would really start to get these conversations to happen so that we can start to see those changes actually occur.
I'd just like to add that following the tragedy at Parkland, the state of Florida, the House and the Senate passed more progressive gun reform regulation, and one of my colleagues, Representative Christine Hunchofsky, was the mayor of Parkland at that time. Unfortunately, since that time, we've rolled back some of those protections, and we passed a law that would allow for permitless carry in the state. And with parents from Parkland there and the former mayor talking about her lived experience there, we know that that is contrary to what the majority of Floridians and the majority of Americans believe in and support. We do think that there is going to be even more attempts to roll back some of those common sense reforms this coming year, even whether it's targeting, the purchases that you make. So our law enforcement has less tools to identify people who may be planning to harm themselves or others. And so I think while this is a bipartisan supported initiative, we need to be strongly supporting those candidates and those elected officials who are going to support those.
Brass bullet casings turned into an instrument of hope. 2 students, survivors of the Parkland, Florida mass shooting, joined by 71 musicians, honoring the victims and survivors of gun violence by performing their song, Shine. You threw my city away. You tore down the walls and opened up all the gates. You ruined this town. You burned all of the bridges and you slowly let us drown. But you're not gonna knock us down. We'll get back up again. You may have heard
hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger and we're not gonna let you in. We're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark, but together we will shine the light and whoa, we will be something special. Whoa, we're gonna shine. We're gonna stand tall, gonna raise up our voices so we'll never, ever fall. We're done with all your little games. We're tired of hearing that we're too young to ever make a change. 'Cause you're not gonna knock us down, we'll get back up again. You may have hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger and we're not gonna let you in. We're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark, but together we will shine the light. We can hug a little tighter, we can love a little more, laugh a little harder, we can stand up and roar. We can all come together, it will be alright. Stand up for one another and we'll never give up the fight. You're not gonna knock us down, we'll get back up again. You may have hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger and we're not gonna let you in. We're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark, but together we will shine the light. You're not gonna knock us down, we'll get back up again. You may have hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger and we're not gonna let you in. We're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark, but together we will shine the light. You're not gonna knock us down, we'll get back up again. You may have hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger and we're not gonna let you in. We're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark, but together we will shine the light. Whoa, we will be something special. Whoa, we will be something special. We will shine.
Hope and healing through the arts. Join us. Instrumentofhope.org.
But you're not gonna knock us down, we'll get back up again. We may have hurt us, but I promise we'll be stronger and we're not gonna let you in. We're putting up a fight. You may have brought the dark, but together we will shine the light and whoa, we were something special. Whoa, we